Welcome to the part 5 of Transformers series. In this video, we are going to discuss the scaled dot product attention. In the previous video, we derived the equation of self-attention directly from scratch and it looks something like this. Though if you look at the actual equation of self-attention, then there is one minor difference, and that is this division by root of dk. So what is this and why is it required? That is what we are going to discuss in this video. I could have covered this in a single line in my previous video like the 99% of the resources online. But that is not what this channel is about. This channel is about diving deep into the fundamentals of deep learning and understanding how every single component work and what role do they play. So if you stick around till the end of this video, then I am pretty sure that you will gain a lot of mathematical and intuitive insights on the working behind deep learning models. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, then click on that red subscribe button because we cover a lot of detailed explanation behind every single component in machine learning models. And through that, we understand how the entire model works. So let's not wait further and let's get started with this video. Let's first start with a recap of what we saw in the previous video. Let's say if we have this sentence, love Apple phones, then what we will do is that we will take the word embedding of these three words and create a matrix out of it. So this vector will be the word embedding of love, this will be the word embedding of Apple, and this will be the word embedding of phones. And let's say each word embedding is of size 1, 512. Then the overall size of this matrix will be 3, 512. We will multiply this word embedding matrix with three other matrices, that is WK, WQ and WV. These three matrices will be our key, query and value matrices. And let's say if the dimension of these WK, WQ and WV is 512, 64, then the dimension of these K, Q and V matrices that are generated will be equal to 3, 64. Alright, then in our self-attention mechanism, we will multiply the query matrix with the K transpose matrix. And this matrix multiplication will give us the dependencies between the words. For example, this X12 will be the dependency between the word apple and love in that sentence. And this X22 will be the dependency between apple and apple in that sentence. This X32 will be the dependency between apple and phones. So this way we will get the dependency or the relationship between every pair of words in our sentence. And once we have these dependencies generated, we will perform the softmax function on the vertical axis. And the softmax will convert these values into probability. So if we look at this vector, then the summation of Z11, Z21 and Z31 is going to be 1. And once we have passed this QK transpose into softmax, we will multiply the result with the value matrix. And this will give us our new word representation for all the words in our sentence. This vector will be the new word representation of love. This will be the new word representation of Apple. And this will be the new word representation of phones. And our final expression of self-attention will look something like this. And that's what we saw in the previous video. But if you look at the original attention is all you need paper, then you will find that the equation of softmax is given by this same expression with the difference of only this factor. The authors have decided to divide the result of this matrix multiplication with root of dk. Here dk is the dimension of q, k and v matrices, and that is equal to 64. So this dk is a hyperparameter which is the dimension of the query key and value matrices. In our example, the dimension of QKV was 3, 64, where this 3 is the length of the word, while 64 is dk. And the purpose of this video is to understand why this division is required and what will happen if we do not divide the expression by root of dk. So we have to divide by root of dk because of this following property in mathematics that states that the variance of the result of the matrix multiplication is directly proportional to the dimension of the vectors being multiplied. What do I mean by that is, Let's say here we are multiplying two matrices Q and KT transpose. In this matrix multiplication, the value x11 is obtained by multiplying this vector with this vector. And the overall variance of the values in this result is directly proportional to the dimension of this vector. And this dimension is our dk. The size of the cube matrix is 3,64 and the size of KT transpose is 64,3. So here 3 is the number of words in the sentence and 64 is our dk. So there is a property in mathematics that states that whenever we multiply two matrices, the variance of the result is directly proportional to the dimension of the vectors being multiplied, which is 64 in our case, or we can say dk. Given this, what I'm saying is if my value of dk is, let's say, 2, then my size of the q is going to be 3,2 and KT transpose is going to be 2,3. As the value of this dk is very less, the variance in this result or the variance of these values is going to be less. And as we increase the size of dk, the variance in this result increases. Note that it does not matter what the size of this matrix will be. Even if my dk is 2 or 64 or 512 or even 1000, the resultant size is going to be 3,3 only. But the variance of the values inside this result is going to be higher with the higher value of dk. So what is the relationship between this property in mathematics and division by root of dk? My answer to that question is, whenever we have high variance in deep learning, it leads to vanishing gradient problem. And vanishing gradient problem hinders the overall training of the model. So as the variance of this matrix is directly proportional to the dk, which is 64, the variance is going to be high. And high variance is going to lead to vanishing gradient problem and it will hinder the training of the model. So we divide by root of dk to lower the overall variance. Once the variance is low, we will be able to avoid vanishing gradient problem and we can smooth out our training process. And this is the explanation that you will find in most of the resources online. But this channel is not about giving you one-liner definition. This channel is about diving deep into the whys. Why certain things work like that? Why do we use something the way we use it? So in this video, we will first look at the proof of this property in mathematics. Why the variance increases with increase in the dimension of the vectors being multiplied. Then we will look at why high variance leads to vanishing gradient problem. And then we will see the exact reason why we divide by root of dk. Why only this number? So let's first start by diving deep into this property. Why the variance increases with the increase in the dimensions of the vector being multiplied. So intuitively, we can understand this by taking few random two-dimensional vectors and multiplying them. Here I have generated few two-dimensional vectors whose values lie between -10 to 10. If we multiply these randomly generated two-dimensional vectors, then the result will look something like this. In this result, you can see that the maximum value is 23 and minimum value is negative of 23, while the mean of these values is -0.5. Let's convert this into an integer for simplicity and I'll consider the mean close to 0. So you can get the overall idea of the variance in this result. For those of you who have forgotten what variance is the deviation of values from the mean. So if my mean is 0, then the variance in a set of number is the deviation of all the values from 0. So in this expression, you can say that my overall variance deviate from -23 to 23. And you can get the overall idea of the variance. Now we will repeat the same exercise, but this time we will take 5-dimensional vectors. And the result will look something like this. In this result, you can see that the minimum value is negative of 49 and the maximum value is 122. And the mean of these numbers is approximately 66. So at this time, the numbers are deviating from 66 to 122. That is approximately the difference of 56. And on the negative scale, the numbers are deviating from 66 to -49. and the difference is more than 100. So clearly the variance in the result where we were multiplying the 5-dimensional vectors is much higher than the variance in the set when we were multiplying 2-dimensional vectors. And the reason why this happens is because of the number of terms that we are adding. As the dimension of the vector increases, the number of terms that are getting added in the overall result increases, and thus the values in the result increases. For example, the highest value that you can get out of 2-dimensional vectors, in which the values range from -10 to 10, will be by multiplying 10, 10 with 10, 10 vector, and that is going to be 2 times 100. While on the other hand, the highest value that you can get out of a 5-dimensional vector will be equal to 5 times of 100. So as the number of terms that are getting added increases, the overall values in the result increases, and thus the variance increases. So this was an intuitive idea why the variance increases. If you want to know by exactly what factor the variance increases, then you can say that the variance of some matrix C that was generated after the matrix multiplication of A and B will be equal to n times variance of A and variance of B. This condition will hold true if we assume that the entries inside the matrix A and B are independent random variables with zero mean, and assuming that the entries of A and B have identical variance. But this is an ideal condition. We might not always have zero mean for A and B, but generally we can say that if our mean of A and B is roughly close to zero, then the variance of C can be roughly equal to n times variance of A and B. I have even attached a proof of this down in the description box. So if you are a statistic enthusiast and you want to know more about how this equation was generated, then check that proof out. It will give you a good idea of statistics and mathematics behind this. But at least I hope now you are assured of this property. So let's move on to our next discussion, where we are going to see why this high variance is a problem in deep learning. It is a problem because we are going to pass this high variance matrix into softmax function. And the nature of softmax is such that it converts the large values into larger values and small values into smaller values. So it amplifies the difference in the values. For example, if I have a 2-dimensional vector with values 7 and 3, and pass it into softmax function, then it will be converted into 0.98 and 0.02. Here you can clearly see that the difference of 70% to 30% is amplified to 98% and 2%. So softmax scales that difference even further. So whenever we will pass a high variance matrix or high variance vector into softmax, it's going to scale the difference even further. So it can convert the vector in such a way that one of the value can be 0.99 and rest all values could be close to 0. Also understand that this vector is going to be further processed with weight parameters. So when you multiply this vector with weight parameters, the overall result will be only based on the weights associated with this neuron. These weights won't be contributing in the overall prediction because these weights will be multiplied with 0 and its values are gonna be nullified. So this is the problem that our model will face. Because only these 3 weight parameters are contributing in the overall prediction, our model will only train these 3 weights and it will ignore all the other weights. The way training happens in deep learning is, at first we initialize these weights with random values. And we pass an input to the model and make a prediction. Because these weights are initialized with random values, this prediction is not going to be accurate. So we will show the actual value that the model should have predicted, and we will ask the model to adjust its weights in such a way that instead of predicting this wrong value, the model learns to predict the right value. And this nudging of weights or changing the weights happen in the backpropagation step. But if any of the input in the model is something like this, then these weights are not contributing to the overall prediction. So the model will only adjust values of these three weights, because adjusting the other weights does not make any impact in the overall prediction. And this is how the training of the model will be stuck. We won't be able to train the model appropriately because the model is not utilizing all the weight parameters. So I hope you can understand why high variance is a problem in deep learning. Okay, so now let's move on to the final chapter of this video, and that is to discuss why we need to divide by root of dk. So let's say x is equal to q times kt transpose. What we have already seen in the video is that the variance of x is directly proportional to dk. Given this, let's assume that when the dk is equal to 1, the variance of x is equal to a. Then in an ideal scenario, what will happen is if dk is equal to 2, then the variance of x will become 2 times of a. When dk will be 3, the variance of x will be equal to 3 times of a, and so on. When dk is equal to 64, the variance of x is going to be 64 times a. Remember that this will happen in an ideal scenario, not always. So this variance can be anything, but we can say that in an ideal situation, it can produce something like this. And this is where the problem is. As the dk is increasing, the variance is also increasing. What we want is, despite the value of dk, the variance of x should remain the same. So even if dk is 2, 3, it should remain same. Even if dk is 64, it should remain the same. So this is what we want to achieve. Now think about it. What are the ways to reduce the variance? If you want to reduce a variance of a set of numbers, then how can you do it? One easy way is divide all the numbers by a certain value. For example, if I calculate the variance of this vector, then it will turn out to be 200. If I divide this vector by 10 and then calculate its variance, then it will be 2. So to keep this variance same, I have to divide x by some value. But the question is what that value will be. So to rescue us, we have an interesting property in mathematics. It says that a variance of any matrix is var of x, and if I multiply some constant number a to this matrix, then its variance will be equal to a square of var of x. And this is the property that we can use to keep the variance constant. If for dk equal to 1, my var of x is equal to a, and for some dk, let's say equal to dk, my var of x is equal to dk times of a, then I can divide this x with root of dk. So here a will be equal to 1 upon root of dk, and that is going to be 1 upon root of dk square of a. And this will be cancelled and we will have a. So if I always divide my x with dk, then no matter what value of dk I have here, my resultant variance is always going to be same. And that is why in the result of q kt transpose, we divide this result by root of dk. And once we have divided this, only then we perform the softmax operation and we multiply this result with v. And this becomes my final formula of attention. So that completes our discussion of self-attention. Through the last 4 videos, we have got an in-depth understanding of self-attention, and it will serve as a solid foundation for the upcoming videos. You can finally say that now you know the in and out of self-attention. In the next video, we are going to look into the multi-headed attention, where we will be just applying the multiple instances of the self-attention. And before you go, if you found this video valuable, then please do hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, share this video among your friends, and keep supporting this channel so that I can make more such future videos. And that's it for this video. Let's now move on to the multi-headed attention.